Good morning. Good morning. If I can have your attention, please. I'd like to welcome everyone to this morning's legislative breakfast, again sponsored by Northeastern Vermont Development Association. In behalf of NVDA, I'd like to welcome everyone this morning. Also, if there's anyone who does not receive email notification of these breakfasts, who would like to receive such notifications, please make sure you leave your email address with me prior to leaving today. Karen Garrity, the Economic Development Specialist for NVDA, who organizes the breakfast, had another appointment this morning, so will not be joining us. We certainly appreciate the hospitality extended to us by the management staff of the Eastside restaurant. And this morning, the continental breakfast, which smells very, very good, is available at a charge of $5 per person. And please remember to put your $5 in the basket before leaving if you participate in the continental breakfast. And the basket is to the right of the coffee urn this morning. This morning, Terry DeFazio is again videotaping these proceedings for later broadcast on Channel 15, the local PEG access channel. My understanding is that today's breakfast will be broadcast tonight at 6 p.m. as well as on Wednesday at 9 a.m. In addition, we're always privileged and pleased to have with us representatives from the print media, namely Robin Smith from The Record and Chris Roy from the Newport Daily Express. Thank you, Terry, Robin, and Chris. At each of our regular breakfasts, we have one senator and two representatives. Looks good, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Come on down.
I think as Robin is showing, I think it's a little more than a regular continental breakfast when you have something like that. But at each of our breakfasts, we have one senator and two representatives as our special guests. Each are given an opportunity to spend 10 to 15 minutes giving us their perspective as to what is happening and what is going to be happening in Montpelier this year. Following the presentation by the legislators, we open the floor to questions and comments directed to the featured legislators. Those asking questions or making comments are asked to stand up in this area to identify yourself and to tell us where you are from. If your question or comment is directed toward just one of the featured legislators, please so indicate. Otherwise, I will assume that your question and or comment is directed to the three featured legislators. The other thing is that we know that there are an awful lot of issues floating around the world these days, and I just ask that in the interest of time, you limit your questions and comments to those areas that can be or are being addressed by the Vermont legislature. This morning, we're very pleased to have as our special guests Senator Bobby Starr and Representatives Lynn Batchelor and Gary Viens. Senator Starr serves as chair of the Senate Committee on Agriculture and also as a member of the Senate Committee on Appropriations. Bobby, please give us your perspective as to what's happening in Montpelier, and I'm sure I speak for all of us in the room when I say we wish you good health.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's a real pleasure, and I want to thank Bill and NVDA for hosting the breakfast. And it's a real pleasure to be here this morning. Great morning, sun shining, warm out. You know, it's got to be a good day. And so it's a pleasure to be here and give you a short report on what we're doing in Montpelier. My committee that I chair, Agriculture, Maybe Johnny Rogers spoke about S-101 that we voted out a little earlier this year. It's a right to forestry bill, which allows people that work our woods to be able to work in the woods without being harassed with nuisance suits such as going to work too early in the morning and noise from the equipment and the chainsaws. And a big issue there is road traffic, trying to keep the trucks from going to get the wood once they get it cut. It's been an issue that's been festering for 5 to 10 years, and finally this year we did pass a bill to protect the people that work in our woods from nuisance lawsuits. We did that for agriculture probably 25 years ago, and the forestry people have gotten along without it, but the last, like I said, 5 to 10 years, people have been giving them a hard time. So we got that one done and passed, and it's over in the House, which they'll take up after crossover when we go back after town meeting. S-276 is another bill that's got a whole slew of things in it. A lot of economic development issues are in that bill to help the rural economy. If you look at like how Chittenden County and the more urban areas are rolling along, you know, they're busy, everybody's working, and then you get to the rural areas and it doesn't really matter whether you're talking about Orleans County or down in Windham County in southern Vermont. The economy seems to be very slow and it's still dragging. So we've got a bunch of issues in that bill to deal with tax exemptions for wood boilers if you want to put in a new wood furnace, tax exemptions, permit relaxations for people that want to set up a business in those areas. Another issue in that bill is, say if you're a farmer and most of our farmers today, you see these big round tanks that they draw their manure in. They go into the field and spread it. When they come back out, there's mud in the road and dirt in the road. And so a lot of these places farmers are thinking about putting pipelines from the manure pit under the road and out to the fields, either to another satellite manure pit or to hook up to a spreader that stays right in the field. And in order to put that pipeline through, many of them have to, of course, cross they're on their own land, but they have to cross what is considered a wetland. And if they cross that wetland, there's a fee of 75 cents a square foot, which, you know, doesn't sound like much, 75 cents a square foot. But if you take that, an acre that they already own, that's like $37,000. So it's kind of a crazy thing, because if they said, well, if we treat everybody the same. Well, if you owned a gas company and you ran a gas pipeline and you went across the wetlands and you had to pay that 75 cents, you add it to your cost of doing business and collect the money from the people that buy the gas. And my argument was, well, how do you think the farmer would make out if he called up Agrimart or NFL or one of the buyers and said, well, you've got to pay me an extra 50 cents a hundred because I crossed this wetland? They'd tell him tough luck, of course. So anyhow, working with the administration and the Department of Environmental Conservation, we got that down to a flat rate of $200 if they cross their own wetlands. And basically that is to make sure that the agencies know where the pipe went and they've got a record of it. There's an outdoor trails provision in our bill that would allow municipalities in the state and even private people to build walking trails on their property without having to go through Act 250, which now there is a problem there with that happening. And you know, like right here in Newport, we're trying to put a trail in to walk across and hook into the bike trail. That would even help that group that wants to do that and push that along. Another provision in that bill is to allow small sawmills to apply and only have to go through a minor permit for Act 250 rather than a major application, which would help. What's happening is the big sawmills, we don't have many, and people buy these portable sawmills and they take them from one place to another place and saw people's wood for them. Well, they're clamping down on them and giving them a hard time, so it'll take care of that issue. Another issue is Efficiency Vermont and the demand charge on electricity. We have a little company in Richford that employs about 10 or 12 people. Their light bill was $21,000 a month to run that little mill, to make shavings and sawdust and wood products. And half of that bill is the demand charge on their electric rates, and a quarter of it was Efficiency Vermont charges to be more efficient. And what it was doing is it was driving that company out of business with that kind of an electric rate. And I worked with those people the year before last and last year, and I mean, we had some pretty heated meetings. And the last meeting that I attended, I mean, it was getting to me a little bit. I don't get too nerved up, but at times I can. And I explained to the utility people, Efficiency Vermont people, I said, you best get this straightened out, because if we fix it in the legislature, you may not like what we do at all. And so anyways, I was talking with, well, I got a copy of the light bill, actually, they sent me. Went from working with everybody. They finally figured out a way to get that light bill down to $9,000 a month. And they're working even to get it lower than that. So there are ways of dealing with things if you beat on them hard enough. And you know, it's not a pleasant way to do things, but sometimes you have to. I don't know, I don't want to ramble on too long, but we're busy, you know, in ag, doing ag issues, economic development issues in rural areas. That's all going pretty good. We're working on right now on the wetlands bill. Well, it's really the water cleanup bill. And we got that bill from Natural Resources last week. And it's kind of a mess, and you'll read in the press, and you'll see it probably on TV, how we aren't doing anything about cleaning up our lakes and our waters, and you know, we're going to heck in a handbasket. We should be raising all this money to do this with. Well, as Bill said, I sit on the Appropriations Committee, and so I know about the money. And we're doing the fiscal 19 budget right now. The money is there for clean water. In next year, they'll be doing the 20 budget. There's money there for clean water in the 20 budget. The following year, be doing the 21 budget, and there's money already appropriated and set aside for the 21 budget. And what they're whining about is that in 22 we got to have money for the year of 2022. Well, I've been around Montpelier for a few years, and if you got a nice big pot of money sitting down there, you better guard it like you would guard Fort Knox, because everybody in the world will be after that for their own little pet projects. So it's not wise to raise money from you folks, because that's where it's got to come from, 3 years ahead of when you even plan to use it, because somebody's going to take that money and use it for something else. So they accuse us that don't want to raise the money as just kicking the can down the road, and we don't want to clean up the lakes and in our waterways, which is about the furthest from the truth as it can be. So anyhow, we're working away in my committee on that bill right now, and you know, I don't really give a hoot what the press says about me. I'm going to do what's best, what I think is best for you people. And hey, you know, if you can't take the heat, you better get out of the kitchen. I love being in the kitchen. So that's that. And on the Appropriations Committee, there's 7 of us, and we divide all the state agencies up into groups. And I do ag and rural development and economic development on a host of like this Vermont Symphony Orchestra and the Historical Society and all those issues. And on the ag part of that, I try to make sure that there's ample money for, you know, to run the agency, which is they're quite a conservative bunch, so you don't have to watch them too close, but you want to keep an eye on them. Make sure that there's money there for our educational program 2+2. Make sure the extension service is funded so they can operate. Vermont Life magazine's another issue, and that's sort of in trouble because they've been spending more than they've been taking in. So Working Lands Grant, VHCB, Vermont Housing Land Conservation, that's a group that helped buy the property out here on Eagle Point, I think, out that way. No, not Eagle Point. So back, the farm that's it. Yes, well, that all keeps that all going. So anyhow, that is, you know, a pretty important place. And I must be running out of time, but I wanted to talk a bit about the work. I wanted to report that you hear people talking about how we're an anti-business state and we don't care about business and stuff. And I just wanted to report that what we've done in the last couple of years, couple of years with some regulations in regards to unemployment and workers' compensation, that this year our businesses in Vermont altogether are going, those rates have gone down enough so it's going to accumulate to be about $50 million that they're going to save in their premiums on their workers' comp and the unemployment rate. So that's, that's worked pretty good. Wanted to talk a minute about the work that I'm doing along with Dr. Leslie Lockridge. We're in the Northeast Kingdom, we have about 100 individuals that are sick with cancer. If you take our area of the state and compare it with the rest of the state, we're actually doing a little bit better on a per capita basis than the rest of the state. And if you look at the whole state, we're better off as a whole than the national average. And so you say, well, we're living in a pretty nice area. I think we are anyways, or we wouldn't be here. But if you look at the results and what happens to people with this illness, you'll find that our area of the state, we have a higher death rate than the rest of the state, and we have a higher death rate nationally than the nation. And so you think about that for a minute and you say, well, that's kind of crazy. We're living in a real healthy environment. We have fewer people that come down with this. So you start investigating and why is this happening? And what you find out is that our people have to spend from an hour and 15 minutes to 2.5, 3 hours to go get treatment. And as our people are pretty independent up here, and we don't have the most money in the world, and you have to do that traveling and miss work, and your family has to maybe take you, somebody has to drive you sometime. They say to heck with the treatment, and so they don't get the treatment. And so it's really important, I think, to the people of our area to have the same care, the same opportunities as people, whether you're here or in Burlington. We're all part of the state, and we should all receive, the same opportunities to have care. So it's going to be an uphill battle to get that taken care of, but I think it's going to be well worth the effort. And I should say too that the hospital so far has been working with us to try to accomplish this. And Dr. Lockridge, he's a good oncologist, a great oncologist, and he spends quite a lot of time helping on this, and it should happen. The other thing I just want to touch on for a minute is the gun issue. And I've never owned a gun, to be honest with you all. And God, I've lived 75 years and still pretty good health as far as gun wounds and things. So I've never been a big pusher on controlling guns and all that. But our society has gone to heck in parents are not parents, and kids don't go play with little toy trucks and stuff, and they play on those crazy computer games that shoot people, I don't know, our whole society has changed and our way of life is changing, but we all know that we can't allow our kids to go to school and be threatened with being shot and hurt, and teachers, and we need to protect them to an extent that they feel safe. And last Friday, finally, we got a bill out of the Judiciary Committee, it's S-221, that makes pretty good sense about taking care of these people that are threatening folks, and you know, they play on the internet and Facebook all the time, and they tell, of course, their friends are gonna go do harm to here and harm there, and so it allows the police to go to a judge and get a court order to go and take the guns away from these people that are causing some of these problems. And I think that's a pretty good bill, and I would hope that I'm going to support that bill. And I would hope that bill passes the Senate and moves on to the House, because we can't allow this to happen if we can possibly prevent it. And I think I was going to talk about some other stuff, but I'm sure I used up more time than I should have. And I'll take questions later on, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Bobby. And Anita, you have a room full of people who have just witnessed Senator Starr indicating he loves being in the kitchen. So I think that means he's going to be doing the cleaning up of the kitchen and doing the dishes from here on out.
Careful.
I'm just using your words. Next, I'd like to call upon Representative Lynn Batchelor, who serves in the House on the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions. Lynn?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. It is, as everybody is noticing, it is a beautiful day, just gorgeous, especially here in the Kingdom. I am on the, as Bill said, Corrections and Institution. It's an unusual kind of a committee. It's a money committee and a policy committee. We have the capital bill, and then we have corrections. And both are very involved, and everybody wants our money, your money actually, not our money. Everybody wants the money that you have paid in, and we just sort of have to divide up as best we can to do what is best for our constituents, and that's it. That's the bottom line, taking care of you guys in our community. I have a couple things here. I finally wrote them down. Normally I'm off the cuff, but there's times when I'm off the cuff that I'm also way out in left field someplace. We did a bill that took 2 days, and you people will be amazed that we did a coyote bill. Now, we can kill coyotes 365 days a year and no problems. But we can't have a competition. And that's what everybody is saying, no competition. Of course, we were going to have jail time, and what took us the 2 days was the jail time. We finally got rid, here we're trying to get people out of jail, and we're going to put people in jail for 6 months and a $4,000 fine. Didn't make sense at all, especially for something that you can do 365 days a year. So it took us, like I said, 2 days to finally, excuse me, 2 days to finally get the part of jail time off the books. The wildlife management bill, some people stood up and said, well, does that mean fishing contests? We can't have them either. I mean, and yes, stupid is a good word. Sorry, I know you didn't want me to repeat it. Stupid is a good word. We all thought about that. Bobby hit on the guns. There's a gun seizure bill that Governor Scott for safe schools, and it passes the House and goes to the Senate. So they're going to be taking it up. We have had, and I have had, lots and lots of testimony and emails on, don't take away my Second Amendment rights. And I agree, I love my gun. I don't want anybody else to have it, thank you very much. But the major thing that, excuse me, he was really, gives the police the power to remove guns from homes with domestic disturbances, and that was his major idea. But our opponents are saying, they express concern about not only the Second Amendment infringement, but about the real-life possibility of unintentionally leaving a potential victim in the home with no protection, with the gentleman or whoever enraged that the police took their guns. So you just can't cover everything. That's all there is to it. There were all kinds of, the NRA, the Sportsmen's Association, everybody spoke on it. Everybody put in their 2 cents. I had one gentleman that actually had a very good idea when he sent me a text, and that was, in the State House, we have the security badges, and that the students should have security badges, and the only people that get in are the ones that have the security badges. And that would keep somebody out. If you're expelled, yours is disabled. So it possibly would help. I don't know what the answer is, none of us do. Let's see. Oh, we have a new CEO of Vermont Electric Co-op. Since the present CEO, I wasn't, never mind, I'll behave. I'll just behave, it's not very easy. We have a new one who is very much under the ideas that the Northeast Kingdom can't afford any more excess. The Vermont Electric Co-op had to pay over a $500,000 fine because we made too much electricity. We have no transmission lines, so they paid $500,000 out of all of our money because we didn't do it right. So she was one of these, this young lady was one of the people who stopped the Derriere Farm for putting up a windmill because we have so much with Lowell and Sheffield that there was no reason to have it. Let's see. Oh, and the really good thing is that we have a Vermont state veterans flag. And what this is, it designates and honors and remember flag is for the veterans. It was created to recognize U.S. Armed Forces personnel who died in the defense of our nation. Its designation as the state's veteran flag will create an official state symbol that recognizes the dedicated military service of those Vermonters who died in combat as members of the U.S. Armed Forces. It's pretty cool, and it really looks nice. And when we all get a picture of it, I think we'd be very proud to have it hanging underneath the American flag, to at least say thank you. In my Committee of Corrections and Institutions, we are hitting on just about everything you can think of. We are not having the great big huge 925 bed. At least at this moment we are. Things change daily, needless to say. For one thing, the location. We could save money if we had one great big huge prison. However, way up in Franklin County isn't the place to put it because it's definitely not centrally located. And so we're working on that. We're working on trying to find, we are at a loss for some of the beds, forensic beds, which are people that are sentenced to be in the hospital from the court. And it's just changing daily. That's unfortunate, but that's changing daily. I have to share something very, very good. We had an after-school program, and they were down, everybody was there, all the kids from all the different schools. And I had 2 young ladies and a teacher from Holland School. They were in 6th grade, and we took them around, Brian Smith and myself, and Bobby was not there that day, John Rogers. John took them through the Senate. They actually had very personalized tours. And I got a wonderful thank you. And the one little girl came in and as she walked in the door, she said, "I feel like a princess." And I said, "Oh my goodness," it just warms your heart. But we took them everywhere. We took them to see the Lieutenant Governor, and he was very welcoming and very warm, and they enjoyed themselves, had all kinds of pictures taken. They learned about government. They learned about what we do. They learned about that they are our bosses. And without their support, we wouldn't be down there in the legislature. They learned that we called it the State House, the People's House, and they thought that was real cool. And we just had a wonderful time. And I just wish we could have more schools and more children come down and see what we do and how we do it, and get them interested. We need young people interested, and not just people that are retired to go into the legislature, but you can't very well do legislative work and not have a job, It's just too difficult. So I will be very quiet, and I'm going to sit down, and thank you very, very much. And I touched on a little bit of everything. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. And now I'd like to recognize Representative Gary Vians, who serves on the House Committee on Judiciary. Gary?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending today. First, I'd like to thank Bill for moderating this event. Also, NVDA, the Eastside, Dina and Pauline for being gracious hosts, and you, the listening public out there. Normally, politicians don't correct each other, especially in public forums, but I believe that it's my duty to clarify something that Senator Starr said a few minutes ago. And when he was talking about heat and kitchen, he likes being in the kitchen. That, everybody, is a political metaphor. Because I've lived with the man for 4 years, and the only time I've seen him in the kitchen when I say the words, "Bobby, supper's ready." Just to let everybody know that. As Bill said, I'm on the House Judiciary Committee, and I'm also on the Joint Committee for Judicial Retention, which is we meet every year and decide if judges who are appointed every 6 years they should be reappointed for another 6 years. So we're presently going through that process. In the House Judiciary Committee, we've been extremely busy this year, and just as a snapshot, last year in the House Judiciary Committee, we took up and passed a total of 19 bills. We're 1 week away from our midway point, and so far this year we've passed out 12 bills. So we're going to far exceed last year's total of 19. Some of the bills that we're presently taking, of course, we passed marijuana here the first week of the session. Well, now, in fact, I voted against the legalization of marijuana, and my biggest thought on that was we don't have enough roadside enforcement to enforce the laws to make sure people are not driving drugged. Well, this week, last week, next week, we're taking up it's S-235. It's a saliva testing bill. And so we're working on that diligently, taking testimony from a multitude of people, and trying to determine that if it's going to be effective, safe, and it's going to be a tool to put in the police officer's toolbox to stop, slow down, protect the public, general public, from people driving drug. Now, this saliva test, it's what they call an oral swab test. It's almost like it's like a Q-tip adapter that you hand to the person who the police officer believes may be driving drug, and they themselves administer the test. They can stick it under their tongue and it wait for probably 10 seconds or so. It turns blue. They can take it out, put it in a vial, put it in a machine, and it determines if they have THC in the blood system. it is a non-evidentiary test. So basically, it's the same thing as when you get stopped by the police and they think you're driving, drunk driving. You have what they call, I don't know if they still call it that, but when I was a police officer, they called it an alco sensor. A little, almost looks like a flip phone type deal, where there's a plastic tube at the end, you blow into it, and it determines if what your level of intoxication is. That's also non-evidentiary, which means then that just gives the police officers reasonable suspicion to take you to the station and do a full process of your DUI. Well, with this saliva test, again, you can go to the police station. They have what's called a Traeger, larger, more in-depth test on it. But again, from that point on, you still are going to have to get a warrant and go to the judge, get a warrant, and then take them to the hospital for a blood test. So it's just one more tool in the toolbox. So again, working on that. Some of the other things that we're working on is a bail reform bill. Lynn talked about the coyote hunt deal, and I was against it only because of the up to 60 days in jail for doing something that under normal circumstances is perfectly legal. Again, you can go out 365 days a year, shoot a coyote, but if 4 people get together, 3 people get together, throw $10 in the pot to see who's going to kill the most coyotes that day, you could go to jail for 60 days? Come on. So again, we're working on bail reform to keep people out of jail, to lessen the burden of our jails on society. Some of the other things, at H660, which is a criminal reclassification commission. Again, here in Vermont, we have a lot of laws. It's kind of it's a hodgepodge where the crime doesn't fit the penalty. Well, they're going to have a commission that studies each bill's felonies and misdemeanors to make sure they're classified correctly. So again, in the end, we're talking about making sure the crime fits a penalty and there's not excessive jail time. So we're working on that. Child hearsay. Today we have families that are in crisis, parents that aren't being parents, and Department of Children and Families, DCF, has to step in quite often and take control of the situation, look out for the best interest of the child. Well, if a child's been abused and, they've obviously been traumatized, and so the investigators and DCF workers sit down with the child and they get a statement from the child, and they come to the determination that if the case goes to court, that child will be re-traumatized by having to go in front of the court, in front of strangers to give their testimony. Well, this hearsay bill will allow, if there's certain test, for lack of better terminology, determinations, the truthfulness that the child is giving this statement, then at that point the statement itself can be given to the court as, just like a child would have to get up and testify in front of the courts. As far as I'm concerned, it's a great bill that we're working on. We're not there yet. We're still working on it. We're working on an act for people who are victims of crimes. They have to go to court to testify. The employers don't give them time off. They don't want to be involved with this because they're afraid, the businesses are afraid that it might give their business a bad name and whatever. So they don't. They either terminate the employee or turn around and don't give the time off for them to go to these hearings. Well, this will protect the employees, so they are allowed to go to these hearings. Electronic court filings. Again, when it comes to domestic abuse, a lot of times it happens on weekends, nights, weekends, and the the spouse who is being abused somehow gets out of the house, they call the hotline for domestic abuse here in the state, and so they set those folks that run the hotline set this person up with court employees who have to go and meet in a location. It could be McDonald's, could be in this parking lot, and they have to take the statement and get them to sign off on it. Well, this bill here, and the problem with that is it's putting everybody in danger because they don't have police officers around them. They only have, these court clerks and things and people like that, and the victims themselves. Well, this will allow them to go to the police station or whatever and electronically file this this court order, so they don't have to meet in the dark alleys or whatever to get it accomplished. Working on that. Data broker and consumer protection bill. We all heard about Equifax and the debacle that was caused last year, and this bill will strengthen the data brokers in their ability to collect. It really is kind of like a clearinghouse in the state where the data brokers have to pay a yearly fee of $100, and the state will monitor to make sure that they're in compliance with all laws to protect consumers to the best extent possible. Well, we've talked about the gun bills enough. I think that we're going to be, there's going to be a lot of gun bills coming before my committee, the Judiciary Committee, as well as everybody else's committees. If you folks want, I printed out 2 copies of Governor Scott's 5-page memo on the subject. They're over on the table there beside Chet. Please feel free to come over and look at them after the meeting, and or take a copy home and read it. But it'll explain to you pretty much what the governor wants to try to accomplish. And budget, I guess, is the last thing that I'm going to talk about. She's doing pretty well. One of the last things I want to talk about is the budget process this year. It's going to be tight, like it always is, but I'm going to give you one quick example of why it's even going to be tighter. There's a gentleman, the Defender General in the state of Vermont, Matt Valerio. I've only been there for 4 years, folks, but this gentleman's come in every year to our committee because we do review judiciary budgets, the courts and the Defender Generals and things like that. And he's always come into our committee the prior 3 years and said, "Don't worry, folks, I got plenty of money, it's all good." This year he came and says, "Oh my God, I'm going to need more money." So when Matt Valerio comes into my committee and asks for more money, we're in trouble. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure we'll be up here in a minute to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And now we're at the point in the program where we open the floor to questions and comments from you, the citizens of Orleans County. Usually what happens is at the beginning we have nobody wants to speak or ask questions, but then when we're at adjournment time, there's a whole line backed up. And it looks like we already have a line, so let's start with Chris Roy.
Good morning, Chris Roy from the Newport Daily. Staying with the gun control theme, is it time for the state to consider putting in metal detectors at area schools, at all the area schools? And who would run those metal detectors? Would it be an SRO, or would it be some type of other police officer? And what about other state-owned or public buildings? Is it time to have metal detectors in just the Hibbert building?
Senator Starr.
I believe that, that the way our system is set up, each school district runs their own school. And, I think it would be up to each individual school board if they felt that that would be necessary. What I think on the state side of that would be to determine whether that's a capital expenditure or if it's figured into the overall school budget when they get paid. as a cost of doing business. I'm certain that most schoolhouses today are locked. The doors are locked so only students can get out. You usually can't get in unless you push a buzzer and identify yourself. So I think that issue should be left up to each individual school district, and I think probably on our end, the state end, we should make that a legitimate cost of doing business and include it, let them, if they want to do that, include it in their school expenditure budget.
Representative Batchelor.
I have to agree, Chris. I think we need to do something to tighten up people coming and going, and our schools are big, and the attendance is large, especially here, like North Country High School. People are coming and going all the time, and we're very much thinking of what it is that we can do, and I mentioned the swipe cards. Also your metal detectors. But I don't know how it's going to be paid for, and that's going to be the rub in the whole situation. Whether it's going to be the schools, whether they will ask the state, and of course, as we know, we don't have a very large budget in the state. We do have a large one, we just don't have any money left paying for everything else. So it's a good idea, it's a viable idea to put on the table, and we'll take it from there.
Representative Ians.
Very good question, Chris. My belief is that everything should be on the table. We should be reviewing school security policies, mental health issues here in the state of Vermont. But I told you about Governor Scott's 5-page memo. In his memo, he says immediate security reviews. Absolutely, go find out exactly what every school has presently, work on that, and determine where there's room for improvements. Lynn talked about the swipe cards. Absolutely. Metal detectors, absolutely. These things should all be looked at. I talked to again, 32 years in law enforcement, 27 in the Border Patrol. I talked to a fellow retired Border Patrol agent on Saturday who he retired 6 years ago, and he became a social studies teacher in a high school in Arizona. And I asked him about certain school personnel carrying firearms, and he said, you know, at first he said I would have disagreed with that 100%, but in today's age and climate of tragedies happening in the schools, he said I certainly am still qualified and able and would be willing to carry a firearm. There's all over the country, there's what they call go teams, people who are plainclothes, who are trained to respond to emergency situations. I don't know if this is an answer, but I think everything should be on the table. We should at the very least just look at the possibilities of having 5 or 6 people who are in the school systems fully trained and qualified to act as one of these go teams. I don't know, again, there'd be pushback all over the place on that one, I'm sure, but again, as far as I'm concerned, everything needs to be on the table. We have to have an honest, open discussion about what's best for our children, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, my name is Pam Lance. I live in Newport, and my question's for Lynn, specifically to Lynn, because you have the whole package. I want to talk about Camp Hill. We in Vermont and other states are sending prisoners out of state. Currently, we're sending them to Camp Hill. Camp Hill is a hellhole. It's the only way of describing it. I used to live in Philadelphia. I've had contact with Camp Hill. It was horrendous then. It's clearly not any better. This is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to really rethink what we're doing with the prison system, who we're incarcerating, why we're incarcerating, and looking at the long-term implications of not doing it right, of not providing rehab, of not providing ongoing contact with families. People get out of prison, they have nowhere to go, they've lost contact with their families, and they have no social skills anymore because they've lived in a kennel, basically. And that's unrealistic, it's totally unreasonable, and it's not humane. What can you do about it?
Over here.
Representative Batchelor.
Over here. That's a heavy load.
Yeah, I know, but you can do it.
We talk about it all the time in our meeting. As far as I know, the last thing I heard is we are bringing back the people from Camp Hill. Just for those reasons. They are not being cared for. We have, instead of a contract that we can negotiate, we have a compact, which means our prisoners are now Pennsylvania's prisoners, and they can be treated however they treat Pennsylvania prisoners. They do not seem to have, as we've investigated more, they do not seem to have the programming that we insist on here in the Vermont prisons. We always have had something to help people. We have been discussing the MAT treatment, which is medically assisted treatment, as far as your drugs, and having people go into the prisons. That doesn't happen. Nothing actually happens other than being incarcerated and in a cell. And so I definitely agree we need to bring them back. And that was part of the plan for that 925-bed facility. It's just not in the right place at this moment. We still have Windsor that's open, but it's not a wonderful facility. It's older. It needs to be rehabbed, which of course takes a lot of money. It has no sight, so you can't see people around there. Too many corners. So dangerous as far as the officers are considered, and they would like to have something where they're sure where people are so they don't jump out at them as they're going down the hallway. But bringing them home, to answer your question, is our major idea.
Julie.
Good morning, all. I'm Julie Raboyne, and I live in Newport, and I work for the Vermont Department of Health in our Newport office. This question or comment is for Senator Starr, and I had no idea that you were working on the project with Dr. Lockridge. Well, let me back up for 1 second. I cannot and do not speak on behalf of the Department of Health. This is, my comments are informed by the work that I do. I wanted you to know that there is a group of folks from our whole hospital service area that works on health equity. And one of our key phrases is that your health should not depend on your zip code. And so you're absolutely right. There's such a difference between access to care and your overall health outcomes. So we have a lot of local data and resources that we would be happy to share with you and Dr. Lockridge if you want to work with us. And one of the things that we believe is one of the root causes of poor health outcomes, including children who grew up to have violent conditions and mental health issues, is what's called adverse childhood experiences. And there is another local group called Building Flourishing Communities that is advocating hard for our local schools and our state government to address adverse childhood experiences, also referred to as ACEs. And in the legislature, you might hear it referred to as trauma-informed. There's a number of bills in the legislature right now that is addressing trauma-informed workforce and schools, and I strongly encourage you to search those out, make sure that you know what they're about, and support them. And as far as our local government, Lynn, that story of Holland School is so heartwarming. And that is exactly why I love the Vermont legislature so much. I love our state. And thank you, all of you, for your service.
Senator Starr.
Well, thanks a lot, Julie, for offering the help, and that info would be most helpful. Access to care. I don't know if I mentioned, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but Kevin Mullen who's chair of the Green Mountain Care Board. Claudio Forst, Dr. Lockridge, and I are going to sit down hopefully next week when we're off from Montpelier. And I said, hey, we'll work to Kevin's schedule because it's really important to have, if the Green Mountain Care Board okays certain cost shifts, there's no reason in the world why we can't offer that service to our people, and because it's an equity issue. We should have the same care as everyone else. And I think Kevin, from working with him for 20 years in the House and then in the Senate, because he used to be a senator, yeah, I'm sure he comes from a little town down near Rutland. So I'm sure that he's going to have some sympathy for what we're lacking up here. And so the hospital's concerned about if they lose too much money, it's not good because we really need our hospital and they can't run at a loss. So, but there's a way that the Green Mountain Care Board can shift that cost around to help rural hospitals. So if we had that info that you folks in your group have acquired, it'd just be one more thing on our side. So thank you, and I'll be in touch to try to get that.
Great.
We only have 12 more minutes left. We have 3 citizens, so I would ask that everyone keep their comment as brief as possible, and also ask the legislators to keep their responses as brief as possible so we can get to know them.
Robin Clark from Lowell, and I'm here. I'm upset with the gun issue in the schools, but I see it as a bigger picture. I really think we need campaign finance reform. We have huge organizations that are controlling the agenda either in Montpelier and in Washington. I've seen it myself with VPIRG in Montpelier, who claim to be a nonprofit but are running on a $3 million budget. And I see the NRA as a very powerful organization, another organization controlling our agenda. And I really think campaign finance reform is probably the answer to a lot of these problems. There's more lobbyists in Montpelier than there are legislators, and they do not wear identification of who they work for, and I think that's what we need to address, is the bigger picture. Thank you.
Senator Starr.
Thank you, Robin, for the question. In regards to campaign finance reform, I've always operated under that system. I don't take donations. If you wanted to send me $5, but that'd be great. But I like financing my own campaigns. Then I have no allegiance to anyone but you folks. You start taking money from people, they want access to you, and so I'm a strong believer in campaign finance reform, and I know just what Robin is talking about. I never witnessed it until about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Batchelor.
That was great. That was great. I too, I've never taken any money from anybody since I started, and for the exact same reason. I financed my own campaign, bought my own signs, did my own footwork, and the whole 9 yards. We tried to pass a bill. It never got anywhere. I would imagine the lobbyists lobbied against it, about having lobbyists wear identification badges to let us know who we're talking to. Because 9 times out of 10, we don't know who we're talking to, and the lobbyists in themselves change every year, actually, and we get new ones, and it's very difficult. So I totally agree with you. And campaign financing, you know, do your own if you can. I don't know how anybody runs for president or why they would, but, you know, they have all that money.
Representative Jens.
I think there's absolutely two things that we could do. Don't know if it'll ever happen. Campaign finance reform is one. But in the State House for the last at least 3 years now, there's been a bill on the wall. It's normally in the Judiciary Committee. This year it's over to Government Finance, I believe, but it's a term limit bill that basically it's geared more towards if we passed it in the state, we'd become just one of hopefully a multitude of states that would put forth a Article 5 constitutional convention, which would, again, they'd have to come together and do some sort of a bill that would be, that wouldn't go through Congress, but it would actually go through this committee that Congress would have to abide by, again, for term limits, and we'll see where it goes. I don't have much faith that it will pass in Montpelier, but I'm optimistically hopeful, I guess. Thank you.
Next.
Yeah, I had a couple of...
Please identify yourself.
my name's Tom, I'm from Westfield. Good enough. I've got a question with the Judicial Committee here. I realized back when they had turned the prisons to private prisons, at that time they started turning all the misdemeanors into felonies to keep the prisons full, as far as I could see. There's no reason for that. Like you have addressed before, there's a lot of crimes that shouldn't be, a lot of people in prison that shouldn't be there for petty things. That I'm glad you're looking at that. A lot of reform there. As far as the DCF taking statements from children, I think that whole department needs to be reformed. I don't trust those people. I think they should be screened better. And as far as taking children from statements from children, I've seen them do that, and I had some dealings with the DCF in that whole situation, and they redact things. And I don't think you get true statements. You get a true portrayal of a child's complaint. I know it's a shame to put a child into a court situation, have them testify, but it's the other hand, it's to have those people take statements and twist them the way they want for the outcome to be the way they want it. And that's what I think they do. I don't trust those people. I think they just need some reform there. And the other point I have is the car inspections. You know, I'm a retiree. I live on $1,300 a month. It cost me $400 to get my car inspected. And one of the petty complaints they had, I had to get new license plates because the paint was chipped on my license plate. Now, what the hell that has got to do with safety? Or, like someone mentioned before, a rusty rocker panel. I think you should follow the money in this. Who's behind these stupid laws? There's no reason for those type of things. I think that should need some reform too. Thank you.
Senator Starr, in 1 minute or less.
That's next to impossible. I talk too slow. Gary will take care of the courts in the sentencing in the prison. As far as the inspection goes, though, a week ago tomorrow, we had a big meeting in the Senate in regards to this inspection law and the finaglings that go on there. And I think there's going to be some action in the near future to change some of that, so we separate out, make sure the car is safe, and forget about the rust and the little things. But make sure you have good brakes and tie rods, but getting rejected for a little rust on the rocker panel, or you have a 4-door vehicle and 1 door handle's missing, and losing out on inspections there. You know, that's not good. So that's where we are. Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Batchelor.
I've had lots of complaints about our inspection stations, and I lived in Florida for a number of years, and they had beautiful inspection stations, huge, monstrous places. They shut it all down. They have no vehicle inspection stations anymore whatsoever. So I'm hoping when Bobby goes and looks at this, we can consider something like that, and because you're going to have rust up here. That's all there is to it. Thank you.
Representative Viennes.
Car inspection bill, there's one in front of the House Transportation Committee right now. They're looking at that. Child statements, again, like I said earlier, there's trained investigators out there that have a protocol to determine if the child's statement is truthful or not. So they're trying to do the best that they possibly can, again, so the child, the child would be re-traumatized not to testify in front of the courts. Jail terms, yes, we are working on that every day. That's one of the big things that we're working on. Again, the punishment fits the crime, so we are being diligent in that regard. Thank you.
And we have 2 minutes.
Oh, goody.
I'll be as quick as I can. My name is Ann Sherello. I'm a Newport citizen. You know, we've recently had in Newport an instance in which hearsay caused great damage, and people should be very wary of letting in a new exception to the hearsay rule. The reason that we have a right to confront the witnesses against us, and it's in the Constitution, is so that somebody can test the reliability, somebody neutral or somebody for the person who's accused can test the reliability by asking questions of the witness. And there should be really no exceptions for children. It's traumatic to be in a courtroom, and it probably is traumatic for a child to be in a courtroom, but it's a necessity before we put somebody in jail or accuse them of a crime or damage their reputation, that somebody from the other side gets to question them to determine. Because sometimes children, as with adults, do lie, and somebody's got to test that. Not somebody who's just trying to be supportive of the child, but somebody for the other side. So I ask you to really think about making this new exception to the hearsay rule, and think about why it's been a truth that we would be able to examine the witnesses who are against us, and why it's existed for 200 years, because it's really vital to our entire judicial system.
Senator Starr, we have one minute for all legislators.
I think, you're right on that about as far as people being accused of something, but it goes on every day of the week. People will start to hearsay stories, and a lot of people's reputation gets ruined, and certainly I wouldn't do anything to encourage that type of stuff.
Representative Batchelor.
I agree with Bobby Starr. How's that?
Okay,
Can I
that's
quit?
good.
Perfect.
Representative Viennes.
And thank you very much for that question. When it comes to adults, there is no question about that. When it comes to children, though, you have to be cognizant of the fact that how badly they've been traumatized. Now, there's no way that somebody will, nobody wants anybody convicted of something falsely. And so I think that the bottom line is they'll do their darndest to ascertain the truth. But again, that's only one piece of the evidence. In the end, the court trial, if it does go to a court trial or a DCF hearing or whatever the case may be, that the judicial system will be fair and hopefully equitable, and make sure that the person, if found guilty, is truly guilty. So the bill hasn't passed, we're still working on it, so I certainly will take your thoughts into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the conclusion of this morning's legislative breakfast. I'd like to thank Senator Steyer, Representative Batchelor, and Viennes, the Eastside Restaurant, and the members of the media. Our next breakfast will be held here on March 19th, at which breakfast our guests are scheduled to be Senator John Rogers, Representative Sam Young, and Mark Higley. Thank you all for attending.